I'm Katie Atwell, co-host of the EduGals podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Tools for Teachers podcast, where each week we talk about a free piece or two of technology that you can use in your classroom. I'm your host, Shannon Martin. I'm a middle school teacher, technology and instructional coach from my district.
And I'm her producer and husband, Fuzz Martin, and there is no argument that I love podcasting.
Aww. Cute.
There we go. I got through the pun.
You got through the pun.
Yeah.
It's hard to do a positive argument thing.
Yeah. Like pros and cons, there's like
nothing.
There's nothing really. Yeah, it was not easy. But here we are. We're talking about arguments. Argument writing today.
We are talking about arguments today and ways to support kids in argument writing. Episode 144. My goodness. We're ticking through. Mm-hmm. The shift between
every time
February
we do a podcast,
March.
I feel like the number gets bigger.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe because it does.
Crazy.
I know. And it's almost starting to feel like spring, kind of. I mean, between the snow and then it's like 40s and then snow and then 40s. And a bunch of our friends have had snow days in the past few weeks here. And we're learning. We're moving forward.
There was one day where you didn't have a school day, but our daughter did, or a snow day.
Correct.
But our daughter
I was
did.
In school and she was home with you.
Yes.
Actually, not at home at all, traveling to all of your work meetings. Yeah. So that was fun.
She got to sit through a nonprofit board meeting as a 7-year-old. She did pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took copious notes, I'm sure.
She ate cookies and drank chocolate milk. That was good.
So we are talking about argument writing this week. Our middle schoolers are working on argument writing right now. And I'm always trying to find and support staff with other resources because when you're writing argument writing, there's always like the go-to, like these are the topics and what do you want to write about? But you also have to find resources and you want to give students an opportunity to put some choice in it and things they're passionate about. So I was digging through resources to have kids have some practice with argument writing or finding pros and cons over things. Mm-hmm. And I found this really cool game.
Okay.
To practice this skill set. So it's before you pre-write or while you're writing to kind of break up the writing and to practice making these decisions when you're pulling facts and opinions and when you're making big decisions and you have to choose a side. You cannot sit in the middle and be wishy-washy. You have to choose a side. So the game is called Quandary.
Okay.
And the website is quandarygame.org. So it's QUANDARY game.org. And it's super cool. So you can sign up and have an account, or you can just play as a guest to try it out. And it's all free. And the goal is that you are creating a society, like as a captain, and you have to make the decisions to set up a successful society. And there's like arguments amongst the people in the community, and you have to help solve their problems by making these decisions to make a successful community.
Yeah.
And so it's like, welcome, captain. You play as a guest. You choose you have two choices of people to be. But then it kind of reads like a graphic novel. Mm-hmm. So the students do need to be able to read. I would definitely say like middle school, I would say like 5th, 6th grade on up could definitely benefit from this. And it talks about like you're the first settlement on this new planet, and it reads like a graphic novel. So it gives you some background. You kind of get to see who the characters are. Like there's a guy yelling about somebody, keep your robot out of my vegetables. And then it kind of walks through, you read like what's going on in the community. And then from there, after you get the backstory, you learn about the colony. Everybody has a job within the colony. So there's farmers, there's doctors, there's scientists, there's hunters, there's like all kinds of people. And then as you go through and you learn about the community and you read through like the council has to make decisions and all this kind of stuff, it's really cool. Then you can choose to, again, it'll switch you back, like register, play as guest. And then you get to choose your episode. So you could decide on lost sheep, the water war, fashion, faction, mixed messages. And when you choose to play an episode, it then gives you a little bit more of a graphic novel to explain the situation. And then from there, you have to get your facts right. So each card is a person within the society. And then you need to say if that person is going to be a part of the fact, the other opinion, or the solution. So you need to decide like where their statements fall within what you need to make this decision for the community. And you have to have 2 facts, 2 opinions, and 2 solutions correct out of these 12 choices to be able to move on to the next situation. So it's really cool. It gives you all of this like practice. So it's like developing this community and the society and being able to choose facts and opinions and being able to figure out the solutions to the problems. And you make these decisions in order to make the community run successfully. So it's a really cool way to practice like fact and opinion and solution and practice those skills in like a kind of a cool gamey type graphic novel-y kind of way. So it's a lot of fun to play and it's very informative and it's teaching these skills in another way instead of just like reading articles and pulling facts and opinions. So it's a great way to practice and it's very like visual and kind of fun. And I can tell you're playing right now.
I am. Yeah. It's pretty compelling.
Like you want to know the story and you want to make the decisions right. So that way your community is doing what it needs to do.
I don't want to kill these sheep. That's the problem. So I'm trying to save them from getting the sheep killed, but I don't want to kill the predators. So.
Right. But you've got to
make a decision.
You got to make a decision and you got to feed your people and you have to make sure that like the balance is kept.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It is interesting.
It's very engaging. So like really when I'm saying play as a guest, you're going to end up playing as a teacher like before you even assign your kids to do it because it's really like kind of cool to play through. And so each thing just walks you through the steps. You choose your people. At any point you can go back to the main menu. And if you're playing as a guest, it will lose your progress. But if you register, then it has your background, your username and your information. So that way you're able to play successfully. It's also cool because it will shift from English to Spanish. So you do have that option as well if you choose that from the beginning. So that's there. There's also, we're talking about the desktop version of it. They do have an app version of it too, where you could play it on your phone. And you can play it on Apple or Google Play. So they do have it available.
So one other cool thing I see while I'm playing this here is when it brings up the word bubbles in the graphic novel. If you hover over the text, it does bring up a speaker and it will play
the audio version of it
for you. So if you have younger students or if you have kids that have accessibility needs, that you can play the audio.
Yep. And also if you want to play as a class too, I think it's kind of a cool way to bring everything in that way. So so there's just different ways to build this in. I think it's a great way to set up kids pulling facts and opinion. It's another way of doing it instead of just writing or dividing them. And the game is super engaging. So QuandaryGame.org. Try it out. It's fantastic. They also have connections for families. So you can play at home as well. It's a nonprofit. So the whole purpose of it is to strengthen people being able to pull and make decisions in life and taking perspective and empathy and decision making. So that all gets built in. So if you go to the homepage, they have stuff for educators. They have stuff for families. So you can encourage kids to play it at home as well, which is pretty cool.
I'll be playing this all the rest of the day.
Great. He's so productive today.
Take over running the podcast on this side.
We can do both. So that's Quandary, which is super fun. And just a way to start. It would be a great way to set up argument, writing, and discussion and things like that. The other site I have for you is like a resource for argument setup when you're writing with students. It's called procon.org.
And what are the pros and cons of this website, Shanna?
Well, let's talk about them. So it's created by Britannica. So I know we talk a lot about Britannica, different encyclopedia things. So it's the whole goal of this site is to be reliable. It's supposed to be nonpartisan, empowering. I will say this is a great resource for kids pulling up argument writing. I will say you definitely would want to be upper, middle, high school for this site just because of the topics that are listed, depending on the maturity of your students. I don't know if I would give them just like free run of this site unless they're a little bit older, just because it depends on like where your students are at, really, like how much they can dive into different issues around the world. So they just may not be as informed if they're younger students, but definitely upper middle school, high school would be great. When you go to procon.org, it gives you a whole setup. So they got like the home, they have all kinds of issues and the teacher's corner, which is great because it gives extra lesson planning and things like that. If you go on the home page, it walks you through like the new topics they've listed in. So they've got new topics, society-based topics, education topics, government, science and technology, elections and presidents, economy and taxes, health and medicine, entertainment and sports, world and international topics, calendars, and other details. So basically, if you find a category you're interested in, such as science and technology, I do that on occasion. They have a title, you click on space colonization. Mm-hmm. Then it gives you the background information on it. And as you scroll through the article, it's got dates and research and data. Should humans colonize space? They've got pros and cons. And there's laid out like 2 pros, 2 cons. They got three different sets of pros and cons. And then there's discussion questions and then ways to take action, which is pretty cool. And you can read more articles, information on it, and the sources where they're pulling all of this information from, which again would be super helpful if you're having kids research a topic and they need to go further into it. They can go into those resources and then pull that information to continue writing their speech or writing their argument paper. Under government, they have like lower the drinking age, gun control, immigration. They have all kinds of relevant topics.
Yeah, some are pretty deep and high level. So I guess going back to your original point, making sure that this is, in.
Yeah, you're not just give like free reign, like do whatever you want. I mean, if you, older students for sure, I think high school students would definitely be able to do that. Middle school, depending on where your school at. And you can help your students out too by just giving them a certain link if they need to. If they're looking, they have a whole section like school uniforms. Like that's a speech or a paper that my students have written before. Pros and cons, arguments on both sides. That one is, they have 6 arguments, 7 arguments, 8, 9, 10. They have plenty on school uniforms, pros and cons, and ways to look at that. That would be very helpful for students. I would say not all of the topics are going to be helpful for all of the students. So just kind of finding what would be best fit for your students and what they're looking for. Even society, they have dress codes and historic statue removal. Like there's so many different topics and they're always adding new ones. They also have another section that's called more issues across the top, and it's debate topics. Mm-hmm. So if you do debates with your students in classroom, I know our high school government teacher does, and students have to set up their debate and have both sides. And so this is a whole nother section that adds additional resources for finding topics where we need both sides of the issue. So one is like Olympics, and you can go through and look at, are the Olympic Games an overall benefit to the host countries and pros and cons and what that looks like. So more issues, not just on the homepage, but you click more issues and it will take you to additional lists of topics that have been popular in the past, and you can bring those back up. So procon.org has an amazing amount of resources if you are setting up argument writing for your students and they need topics and background and research, and it's laid out very clearly. It's labeled very clearly. You can see each side and what they would look like next to each other. And it's just a fantastic resource for teachers and educators when we're talking about argument writing and setting our students up for both sides of issues and teaching critical thinking along with all of that as well, which is really cool. So procon.org.
Procon.org.
Great resource. Quandary.
Game.org.
It's a game that will super help our students be successful with practicing the arguments and finding facts and opinions and things like that. So both of them should hopefully be helpful when it comes to argument writing and setting your students up with both resources and just practice of pulling those facts and opinions. And they can help them out that way.
Great.
So there you go. Episode 144.
144 in the books.
Educating our students one day at a time.
One episode at a time.
Thanks for tuning in. This has been the Tech Tools for Teachers podcast. If you ever have any questions, you can find me on Twitter @SmartNWI. And if you want to get more information on the links to the technology discussed in this episode, you can visit smartnwi.com. If you'd like to support the show, please consider buying me a coffee or two. visit buymeacoffee.com/smartinwi or visit smartinwi.com and click on that cute little purple coffee cup. Your donations help keep the show going. New episodes each week. Thanks for listening. Go educate and innovate.
The ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast and the Smart NWI website are those of the author, Shanna Martin, and not of her employer. Prior to using any of the technologies discussed on this podcast, please consult with your employer regulations. This podcast offers no guarantee that these tools will work for you as described, but we sure hope they do.